What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 409. My name is Steve, one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
No great quote today, John. No good.
Nothing fun.
Voiceover,
quote,
nothing.
No, from this. Usually that comes from the required viewing.
Required viewing.
And there wasn't really.
I was actually John, watching. And I'll never have. Yeah, I'm John. And I'll never have my childhood back.
Right.
Good to see you both. I'm glad we got to. I'm glad we got to make this work. I know, John, you were having some ISP difficulties.
A system-wide outage. Thank you, Comcast, for just like sending me that message. But like my whole family, I was telling you guys before we started recording, it's like we're embarrassingly internet dependent for our entertainment, and our distraction, and some of our productivity as well. So it was very much like, oh, what are we going to do if this lasts? You know, that's the true horror film would be. What if this lasted more than a couple hours?
Right. Yeah, that's the reality right there.
Yeah,
that we live in now.
We're back, baby. Back online.
Let me see here. Sorry, I was reading a note. So this episode we're going to get into required viewing, which was my pick from last week, which is the Max documentary, the CNN Films co-production called Chowchilla. And then we're going to talk about a trailer or two, and then we'll get into, just what else have we watched this last week. Maybe each of us pick a thing or two to mention that we watch, whether it's to recommend or to hopefully not hate on. But we'll talk about those towards the end of the show. So yeah, I don't know. My required viewing I picked this week was Chowchilla, again, CNN Films, Max production. It's on Max if you have that streaming service. If you didn't watch along with us, you can check it out if it interests you after we kind of get into it a little bit. But yeah, honestly, like this is one I feel like I mentioned it last week. I'm targeted constantly for these like Max originals, like whether it's Twitter or social media, something is always popping up in there about one of these Max originals. It's all the docs, it's the true crime things. It's not, it's like that the newer like Alex Jones one has been like popped up everywhere. I gotta watch that. This one was always coming up. There's the one there's like a couple other ones that are just like constantly in my feed, but this one stood out to me just as a pick for this portion of the show, because there was a movie that I can't remember if I mentioned it last week or not, but that growing up, my brother and I, my family, we always used to watch. I feel like we even had it on Laserdisc, but it was a movie called Fortress, which was an Australian film from 1985 that had Rachel Ward in it, who was like probably the only recognizable actress in it. But literally, like after seeing the doc trailer for Chowchilla, immediately I was like, is this based on this event? And in looking for it online, I didn't find anything like tried and true, like this is absolutely inspired by or anything like that. But the story of Chowchilla, like this true event that happened, and what this movie Fortress was about, was like almost the same thing. Like literally, even after watching this, a lot of the aftermath of the actual events, I mean, it was so similar to it. I mean, and that happened 9 years before this movie came out. I'm sure there was something about it that had to inspire Fortress, which, by the way, that's an awesome 80s movie if you ever want to check out a cool Australian flick. But yeah, I don't know, just this idea of this kidnapping of all these kids and on a school bus, and like where'd they go, they just went missing, and the story around their escape, and the impact that it has on the community, the town, the economy, like the people's personal lives or childhoods. Like I don't know, it just seemed really interesting to me, and like I just thought it might be a good pick. We haven't really done many, if at all, any documentaries for required viewing. I'm sure John could probably tell me if we did or not, but
I don't have a list in front of me, but it is a good point. We don't do that many docs.
So it seemed like a good option, being that it's pretty recent. And on Max, which is something that seems like at least a few people have. Had you guys ever heard of the event? Have you ever heard of the doc? Where were you all before kind of I picked it last week?
I vaguely remember the for the special that came on, like the update of the kids.
Mm.
Where are they now? It was like I was like in the 90s or early 2000s. There was a news, like a 50-minute thing that came on TV that I specifically remember. 48 Hours did. The name of it, I actually put it on the server. Remembering the Chowchilla kidnapping, and they kind of talked to funny enough, a lot of the footage from some of the interviews that they had that were like, I guess some of the follow-up from,
Hmm.
how are they doing as adults, kind of came from this documentary, directly from it. I specifically remember it. I remember it. But
Wow.
that's it. That's it. I mean, I didn't know. So I completely didn't know what the event was. I just remember that it was one of those, like, not many people died from it. That, it was vague. Like, I
Yeah.
hadn't looked into the event. I just remember the news saying, like, we're catching up with these. In fact, I thought that the location was out of the country because the name was so weird. I thought it was like in Canada or something. I was like, this is
Y-
clearly not in America. This is not,
Yeah. That
you
that's
know?
kind of why, like, when I saw it, I thought it might have been what this
Yeah,
movie
it's
that I
like,
recall from the 80s was based on. But
right, right, right.
actually, I saw an article just now that it actually, so the movie I'm talking about from the 80s is inspired by a book
Mm.
about real events that happened in Australia. It was in the 1972 Faraday school kidnapping. So that
Whoa.
movie is about an event that is similar to this
Holy
event that
moly.
happened in California. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it is crazy because I feel like I don't know that I'd ever even heard that term, but like the name of the city. Like, I don't, how you mentioned, like, the where are they now follow, I had
Yeah.
no frame of reference for this at all, like beyond
Mm.
or prior to seeing the trailer for this movie. What about you, John? Had you heard of it before, or?
I mean, as a person who also probably gets targeted for those sort of true crime things, or just those sorts of docs that reach into, you
Yeah.
know, like recent history and kind of fill it out a little bit. I I think I had avoided some of the stuff. Like, this one pops up, and I think whenever I see
Yeah.
like kidnapping or child kidnapping,
Yeah.
somehow it doesn't have the same appeal to me. I know that sounds strange to say as like murder. But there's
Yeah.
something about, like, when it's a child case, I always have to kind of brace myself for it, I feel like. So I don't know that I've always sought out the things that have crossed my path that, like Ronald mentions, where it's like a different news magazine has probably approached this or covered it, because I knew that name from that. And I knew there was this kind of mass kidnapping that involved a school bus. But the details beyond that were very, very fuzzy for me. So
Yeah.
all I knew was similar to what Ronald said, that, like, oh, nobody got killed, which is like an amazing, remarkable thing about this
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
crazy.
but it's really, it's more of a kidnapping and escape and survival tale. And then the way the doc plays it, it does that little "where are they now" thing. It tacks on this whole
Yeah.
last section that really is about the aftermath of something like that. And the very interesting note that this case, the the way the people, the survivors of this case were treated, sort of became the backbone of the way we now talk about, or one of the things that became the backbone of the way we now talk about trauma response, in terms of
Mm.
Yeah.
counseling people who've been through something horrible, especially kids, but noticing that people are maybe not even the best judge of their own okayness after going
Yeah.
through something like this. Was it
That's a
really, it's
great
like, now
point.
that's
Yeah.
an obvious thing to think about, but to think that people had to come to terms with that just like surviving and being without a scratch that's great, but it's not, that doesn't mean
That
you're
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 okay.
fine. And I think that's
Right.
something that, again, was, I kind of grew up in the era where people started to notice people's feelings. It's like
Yeah.
growing up
Yeah.
with the 70s into the 80s is when it's like, oh yeah, feelings aren't just something to like make fun of someone for having. um and I think that now it seems obvious, but also that's 40 years ago that we're talking, 40, 50 years ago almost, for this case. So yeah, it was even if I knew certain things, it still didn't feel like something that was old hat to me. I'm almost surprised people don't talk more directly about this case by name, because
Yeah.
it is such a strange case. I mean, Steve, you were the one who
So
chose it.
weird.
Like, I
Yeah.
think when you were suggesting it, you were kind of hinting at the fact that just the story that unfolds is unusual. So maybe talk a little bit about like how did you feel when you kind of dug into this?
Uh yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big things it's weird to watch a documentary and be like, I enjoyed this, but it's a big takeaway when you see a movie or a documentary film like this where it is an opportunity to learn more about a pretty crazy event that happened that, I think even the trailer, it's like it says something about like that you've never heard of. Like it's such one of those things where like, if something like that, and the perspective I had in my mind was like crazy shit like this happens all the time now, and it's completely consumed by like the news media cycle. Like
Yeah.
horrible events happen, and within a month, people completely forget about it. You know, and like in the 70s when this is happening, and the way that news is shared and reported and things like that, and something becomes like a national story. Trying to remember the perspective, like of what level of type of event would that have been to reach that height, or to reach that kind of reach across the country or across the globe. So, watching this and seeing how crazy the story was, and, like it's so crazy, but it's kind of like it's so short lived too. Like it wasn't like a long event, you know,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of abductions or kidnappings or standoffs or searches or things like that. Like it all kind of unfolded fairly quickly, but it's the impact past that really has had like the staying power, which is why I personally felt like when it got to the point of checking in with everybody, like as interesting and crazy as the story was, I felt like the real takeaway for me was like you were kind of getting at, John, was like this idea of like how do you know if you're okay, you know
Yeah.
and yeah, they all got out unharmed or scratches, whatever. There was no fatal experience or anything like that, but like for the course of your life and like how the town responds to it and responds to you was like the piece that impacted me watching this, because yeah, in the time that this took place, the idea around therapy and trauma response and things like that, it wasn't what it is now, anywhere near what it was now, even if it was something there was starting to be a conversation around. So like I don't know, that was really sad to watch a lot of
It
that
was.
stuff, and to think about a child going through something like that and be like the first thing you say, like, are you okay? When if you can just imagine like when these kids are coming up to this guard and it's like, and all this EMTs or everything are coming in, and it's like I can't imagine the response when everybody looks like they're okay. Do you know
Yeah.
what I'm getting
Right.
at? Like that was
Yeah.
the thing that
Yeah.
really stuck with me watching it, was that like it's an event that's crazy, it's horrible, it's traumatic, but in the grand scheme of what somebody would look in on it and say is like, oh, but everybody's okay. Everybody's good.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, but not really. And like I think it's just like that perspective that was really interesting to watch these survivors talk about. And like really kind of acknowledge that like my childhood, a couple of them making, those statements like I lost my childhood when that happened. Like something changed in me forever. And like they probably didn't know that then. They've come to terms with that later in their lives. And that's kind of, it's really sad. It kind of left the movie feeling, making me feel kind of sad about that element of it. Just like, the time period in which this happened, even though it was in some cases a best case scenario outcome. Decades later, you realize like everything is not and was not okay.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Stuff like
what
this
I
is
mean,
really hard for me to watch, man. Like I
yeah,
have a real hard time. Like I'm not like a murder documentary person. I'm not like a kidnapping
Yeah.
cult. Like I just don't. I think some of it just has to do with like the human condition. Like it feels like it's like when you find out that a horror film's based on a real thing that happened, you're like, why the fuck
Right.
would they do that? Why would they make this like a funny thing or a scary thing? And sometimes it feels like when I hear people talk about them, documentaries like this, it's never quite about the thing. It's about how it makes them feel. And I mean, I don't. What about the people? Like, it's just like I'm watching this thing with Gerard Carmichael, and there's this like masked man in the documentary, and he says like, how much control do you have over this? Like this
Right.
stuff is here, people are being taped. Like how much are you giving for this? You know? It's like a
Right.
very weird conflict that I have with documentaries. But also like these stories have to be told because you got to know that like there's an evil like this that exists in the world. And I understand why people take it in because it is good to know, you know, even with the quiet places that we're in, there are some evil fucking people all over the place. Doesn't mean that the
Yeah.
world isn't beautiful, but within the beauty is some nastiness. And, you know, you
Yeah.
have to have an awareness of that. So, you know, for what it's worth, you know, I took it in, but it was hard for me, man. This was like a whole ordeal going through watching it. My heart was like racing the whole time. I shouldn't have that feeling when I'm watching a thing, but I
it's hard to watch, especially because and I'm sorry if I cut you off, but like
no,
you have a child. Like we talked about this before, like we talked
got
about
a kid,
Prisoners,
man.
that
Yeah.
movie. Like when I picked that as my movie when we had our big episode, like
Mm-hmm.
watching that without a child, watching it with a child, watching this as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like and talking about the trauma of that, like what you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting at. It's just like it is a whole different experience, which goes without saying. Like you have a child now, and it's like I can't even fathom the thought
Yeah.
of something like that happening to my child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I don't
And
even
this
want
is
to.
again a situation where everybody survived, but still,
Yes.
even the 30
There's like
hours
weird.
of wondering, and that's kind of what I mean about child kidnappings, or like, we'll be going through like, looking for those to watch. And again, I
Right,
understand totally
right.
why people. I think the same reason why you don't like true crime stuff, Ronald, is the
Mm.
reason why a true crime person likes it. It's just a flipped polarity, but it's the same relationship with the same idea of like,
Yeah.
there's something about it that gets to you. And I think some people are like, I want to look into that. I want to
Yeah.
like
For
answer
sure.
questions and think about it to get my way through it. And then other
Right,
people
Yeah.
might
right,
say,
right.
I don't need to think about it. The idea of the reality in my life is bad enough. Like, or
Yeah.
especially people who've been exposed to something, more
Yeah.
Yeah.
trauma are like, no, I don't need to watch horror because I've had, I've lived through an experience like that. So I understand why people have that aversion to this kind of thing. And I feel it when I'm looking at the description and it says, because if it's a child kidnapping, you're going to be thinking about the parents, and especially as a parent, you're going to be thinking
Yeah.
about your kid, and you're going to be thinking about what you would do. Um, but also, if it's a documentary and nothing much happens in it, you're sitting there going, what's going to be the punch in this thing? Because they don't make a documentary usually about
Right, right.
situations where, oh, and then it was a great thing for everybody. So you're sitting there going, kind of what you said, Ronald, is this human trauma? Am I watching
Yeah.
it? And I think there is a big difference in feeling a reaction and thinking about the human toll in a way that is like empathetic, and in like, I don't even know who does it, but laughing and enjoying it and thinking
Yeah.
it's fun. I think that side, there is like a true crime fandom that's like that, and I
Mm.
I don't identify with that,
Mm.
Um, but I do have a little bit of, I don't know if it's a morbid fascination with some of these things, but I totally feel what you're talking about, Ronald. This whole idea of like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? Is
Yeah.
this being turned into entertainment? And if that's what's happening, why is that a thing
Yeah.
at all? But I think something like this, the question you have with any of these things is, what are they adding to the conversation other than just the sordid details? Um,
Yeah.
and I think this one answers that question with, sometimes it's just focusing on the victim. A lot of times the documentary will give you the full life of the victim and really make you
Yeah.
feel the tragedy of their loss. And so we're not like aggrandizing the criminal in a lot of cases. This documentary does a similar thing. It almost treats the story of who did this and why as like a mysterious afterthought, and
Right.
really digs into that idea of how are the people that went through it faring years later, and specifically Mike Marshall, the guy who seems like he was kind of one of the saving graces of the day,
Mm.
and how he didn't really have any recognition for a long time. I think that was an interesting. I feel like
Right,
this
right.
documentary skirted over some of the stories that maybe would have given it a real hook. I don't know if you felt that way, Steve, that like with reenactments and different things, I mean, it felt like a very familiar, like a nicely done kind of Dateline
Yeah.
level approach at this. And I wondered, like, as much as I didn't want to watch 4 episodes of this, I did think, oh, if this was 2 or 3 episodes, could they have broken in
Got
a
into more.
couple, a
Yeah.
little bit more into some of those things? Because that was a little bit of a story to me. The idea that Ed, whatever his name was, the one adult who was there, that he kind of had the the fame, so to speak, of saving the day. And then it was, I mean, he was very useful in the day, but it actually seems like he kind of fell apart in a way that the kid, Mike
Yeah.
Marshall, didn't,
Yeah.
which had me thinking, and I hated to say this, there was a point in this where I said to Nikki, this would be a great movie. Like, especially
Yeah.
the day of and the escape and everything. I mean, you
Yeah.
could really, like, knowing everybody survives would make it a very almost uplifting kind of movie, you know. But then as
Sure.
I was thinking that, then this documentary really dwells on how nobody's really okay at the end. And so I don't know, I think it's that's what it adds to the conversation. It's just that thought of like, can you ever really say, oh, that person survived, and they're, you know, and assume they're on the other side of this crazy thing that happened? Because the other thing is, we know, probably from our own experience, I mean, people close to us, trauma can come in all forms.
Yeah.
Every level of
Yeah, man.
trauma could be the worst thing that ever happened to you, and that can be pretty rough. But what these kids went through at such a young age, I mean, you couldn't even process at the age these kids
Yeah.
were going through it. So it kind of would be like the thing of nightmares, you know.
Yeah,
You got one
Absolutely.
sure.
kid who was like, they look like demons to me. That's like,
Yeah.
it made it seem so horrifying, you know. And then that
Yeah.
Scary
guy,
stuff,
obviously,
man.
he had like a religious framework for what he was talking about. But just imagine being a kid who thought, you know, what's happening. Where
And
we,
that's the other thing too. Like that's what, mentioning like the town, what the town, the doc's opens talking about, like somebody makes a joke of like, this is the rare town that has more churches than bars,
Mhm.
like, and all these kids like have this faith, a Christian background. And so like, yeah, hearing those kinds of descriptions come into play definitely is a fact, or is kind of influenced and kind of predicated on like how they are growing up in that town, with it being the way that they describe it earlier in the film. But yeah, I don't know, like it is interesting that you say like this would be a movie. Like it is, it does feel like that kind of like a a narrative or a dramatization of it. But I would also recommend checking out that movie Fortress that I mentioned
Oh,
earlier.
I'm definitely going to check it
Yeah,
out. Thank
So
you.
I
there appear to be three movies named Fortress. There's a
oh
1985 movie named Fortress. There's a 1992 movie named Fortress, and there's a
yeah.
2021 movie named Fortress.
This
Okay.
is the 95 one. Is that the Christopher Lambert one?
92 is Christopher Lambert.
Chris, yeah,
85, I
too.
believe, is the one you're talking about.
85 is, yeah, that's the Rachel Ward one. That's the one that's about the school kids. And like it's creepy. Like the kidnappers wear like animal masks, like
Oh,
like a goat, a lamb, like, and yeah, it's wild. Like, and they like hide the kids in like a cavern, like rock system, and they, the whole escape is like it's way more, especially reading that I did find something saying that it was based on a different kidnapping event in Australia. But um yeah, a great like little Australian movie that I feel like we watched all for whatever reason. Like it was like an HBO movie. Like we watched that shit all the time
oh,
growing up.
wow.
And it's one of those things, like in my hunt for like VHS and DVD copies of films that I couldn't find. I have a VHS copy of it somewhere that I was able to find. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, this is on Max again. This is called Chowchilla. And yeah, who's next?
I am next in the rotation of required viewing, and this will be a little bit of a tease of our next episode. I decided to sort of stay on brand, on theme with our next episode, which is going to be episode 410. Anyone in Baltimore knows that's the area code for Baltimore. So we're doing a Baltimore centric episode, which we're being very loose with it, but we're just going to talk about Baltimore on film, in film, Baltimore, movies set in Baltimore, television shows set in Baltimore, anything shot in Baltimore, kind of
Yeah,
like the cultural image of Baltimore. So we're going to do sort of a hometown love fest, or maybe it'll be, I'm sure there'll be some love in there at least. Very Baltimore. We're going to love our town, but we're also going to give it a few licks. Which is a very Baltimore thing to do. But I was looking at movies that I might want to talk about because of one of those factors above, and a
sure.
movie that I've been wanting to rewatch for various reasons. Um, really crossed my path as one of my favorite movies that I saw on the list of movies that were shot in and around Baltimore. This movie was shot in Philadelphia and Baltimore. Um, but it's a movie that I think will be really fun to revisit, from 1995, 12 Monkeys. Cool.
Ooh.
For required viewing. We'll get to see Brad Pitt trying out what he's gonna do with Tyler Durden a little bit later. And I also think it's gonna be fun to see like a really kind of prime emotional performance from Bruce Willis, who sadly is an actor that we may not see any more performances from, but who, you know, when you think about what he was able to do and the different things he was doing over the course of his career, I think this was a real benchmark for me in terms of what he was capable of. So 12 Monkeys. And also, yeah, like, folks, get ready. We're going to talk about Baltimore next week. And I think here's what I want to suggest, guys. We said we didn't really want to talk about The Wire because it'd be too easy to talk about The Wire the whole time.
Yeah.
How about if we all just pick one favorite moment from The Wire to just mention? Maybe
Okay.
we'll talk about The Wire for
I'm
a
all
few
right
minutes,
with that.
and then we'll move on from it, because it feels wrong to not celebrate The Wire. But we know that everybody, if you want to say Baltimore, just watch The Wire. That's too easy. You know, everyone should watch The Wire already.
I get you.
So yeah, so we'll be talking about 12 Monkeys and a moment from The Wire, and then a bunch of our favorite Baltimore stuff on film, in film, around film.
It's pretty
where
exciting.
was 12? I'm looking at this listing of where 12 Monkeys was shot. There's a location that it has on the list here up in Upper Co, Maryland, which is like 5 minutes from my house. And I'm like, where did they film in Upper Co, Maryland? And
well, they
when can I go?
The Senator Theater and the BWI as well.
Yeah, and it looks like the Walters Art Gallery as well.
Mm.
But this is like a house up in Upper Co. This must have been somebody's. I gotta find this out now. I'm gonna report back next week.
The suburban house that the 12 Monkeys lived in.
Yeah, the house.
Around.
Oh, the House of the Monkeys. That's right.
Yeah.
Now,
in the monkey with the shotgun. Yeah, it's like
I'm gonna find out what this is, and I'll get a photo. I'm gonna drive there, I'm gonna snap a photo, and we'll drop it in the pod in the video next week.
Okay. Everybody has a favorite monkey of the 12 Monkeys. Who do you like? Do you like Stinky Monkey, Minky Monkey, Dinky Monkey, or Pinky?
Obviously,
monkey?
I like Schminky Monkey.
Oh, that's right, Minky Schminky.
Yeah, you gotta love the Monkey Schmunky. All right, cool. Yeah, that'll be a good pick for next week, and yeah, that'll be a fun episode. What are we moving to? Trailer. I wanted to mention. I mentioned to you guys before you were recording today. Woo! Neon released a trailer for their horror film called Cuckoo, which comes out in August. And there's been a lot of people talking about it for. I can't remember if it premiered at Sundance or South by. It was probably both, but just a lot of very positive word of mouth on that movie. And those that have seen it, like I know a friend of mine saw it at a festival and loved it. But yeah, Hunter Schafer from Euphoria is in it. Dan Stevens is in it. I feel like I recognize a couple other people in the trailer, but I couldn't really place the names. But just a really, really cool trailer. And like the one clip from the trailer is kind of like a lot of people have been like acknowledging on Twitter and other social media, TikTok, like the scene when she's riding the bike.
Yeah.
The shadow of the person like running after her with the hand outreached. That's an awesome shot, man. Like if the movie has any more of that level of creepiness, and it looks like it will.
Well, they set that up in the trailer too, because there's that long shot where she's on the bike and you see the person just running up, and that gave you enough of a chill to be like, if it's dark and you're on a bike and you see a person running over, and you're like doing the math, like, are they going to make it to the road? Am I going to make it past?
Do they intersect?
Right.
Yeah.
And then it seems like maybe she passes them, and then to see that they're catching up to the bike is insane. So no, that kind of visual representation, cool. And I think horror movies usually do well, especially with a trailer moment like that, like letting at least one little moment play out, even if it's just 10 seconds or something. But like, that's a good way to hook me in a horror, is to give me a sense of one of the actual beats rather than just a bunch of quick shots. No, that looks great. I'm so glad you made me watch that trailer. I was just today thinking Dan Stevens is one of my guys, and how much I think he can kind of do anything. So yeah, it looks like he's doing one more little slice of anything.
He's so consistent, man.
Yeah, he's fun, man.
Yeah.
What else? Any other trailers? Was there any more trailers since last week?
Well, I saw the Furiosa trailer on a big screen, and that was great.
Cool.
Okay, I had not yet seen it, and it made me think. I was debating going to the bathroom, and I saw that trailer come up. I was like, "Oh, I've seen this," and then I got around, and I was like, "You know what? Though I haven't seen it the way it's meant to be seen." If you've been watching your trailers on a screen like this, then you fucking suck.
Yeah.
So I stopped.
Who are you?
What are we doing?
But here's a refund. Leave.
But no, that movie looks great. Get out of here. You don't deserve the movies.
I had a similar thought about episode breakdowns. It's like, hey, stupid, you watched this show, but you didn't notice the 50 things,
Oh yeah.
the little hints
The
here,
Easter
dummy.
eggs.
The Easter
Like,
eggs, stupid. You gotta notice this, dummy.
when did it start getting framed as something you didn't notice? You know, like
Yeah.
I
where it's
hate
like
it.
I think that is honestly like snob clickbait. Like those
Mhm.
of us who
It
like to think we
is.
notice things, when
Yeah,
someone's
oh, for
like,
sure,
yeah,
dude.
10 things about the new episode of, you know, whatever that you probably didn't notice, Steve. You know, and you're looking at that and you're like, well, fuck you. I bet I noticed.
Yeah, no, it's like, wait a second, pause. Let
Hey,
me get my list of things
Yeah.
I noticed while I
yeah,
watched that and make sure those
yeah,
10 are on here.
Are we going to have to get into a notice off
yeah.
here?
Let me see
Especially
here.
the X-Men 97 breakdowns are nuts because it's like a
Yeah.
cartoon's different because it's not like a set. Like a set,
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
limited to how many things you can put in a frame. Cartoon, you can have 80 things in one frame. Your
Flying all over
brain
the place. Yeah.
can't process
Right.
that X factor and this thing was here and this thing was here in one frame.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's funny. It's funny.
Screw you, new rock stars. Screw you.
Yeah, you went right at him. I was like, that's the first one that comes to mind. That's it.
Piece of trash. No, no. He cried on the last one. Did you see the last one?
No, no, no.
Oh man, the one about like Jean and Cyclops. He cried.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
He like
I mean, I didn't see the
cried.
breakdown. I saw the
Oh,
episode.
he bawled, man. It's weird. It was a crazy episode.
Mm.
Yeah.
I gotta watch those. I haven't watched them yet, but I intend to. Everyone likes it. And I believe them.
Oh,
Oh, it's incredible.
Even
You know
my
what I
son.
don't like though? I don't like how people are like pitting it against Invincible or vice versa.
Yeah,
You know,
get
it's like,
out
what
of here.
space do we have to be in? Like, they both are
Yeah.
great. Let's just
Everything's gotta
appreciate
be
that
a
we have two
match,
great
yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why is there got to be a rating like a
Don't
what's
dare
greater
do that.
than or less than? You know? Yeah, that's so annoying.
Yeah.
um, I don't know what. I don't think there was any other trailers. So what else did you guys watch? I mean, what's something that you watched since last week that you want to mention on the pod?
Ronald, I know you saw Late Night with the Devil, correct?
Yes. I did see Late Night with the Devil.
Right. I saw Late Night with the Devil.
I forgot about that. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start from the beginning, man. What the hell did you think about this movie?
Well, I mean, I guess
I'd actually prefer you guys to start at the end. Could you do it
start
from
at the end. You know what?
Just start with
The end
spoilers
is
first and then go back.
pretty interesting, Steve. So you're in for something
Mhm.
here. No, I mean, I think that the concept of this movie and my feelings about it are pretty wrapped up. Like, you know, the idea is kind of like a down the middle concept for me, as far as like it's going to bring in things that can really work.
Yeah.
For horror, you know, the idea of a slow burn, the idea of a kind of found footage approach, the idea of a sort of era pastiche, all that stuff, period piece stuff, that
Yeah.
all is like, it really hooked me in. You know, I found the execution of it at times to be like campier than I thought. Like there was some kind of hammy acting and some some writing, especially of the show within the film, which is like
Yeah.
this is an episode of a talk show from the 70s where a demonic possession is like brought onto the show as like a guest, like a psychologist and a person who's possessed, and it's sort of an attempt not to do an exorcism, but just to speak to a demon as like a segment on a talk show, and it's like a ratings grab for the show. And there's a storyline that you get into that's behind that I think is actually some pretty fun, kind of creepy stuff. But
Yeah.
I think I was thinking that the sort of like era pastiche was going to be really dead on, when it was like a little heightened and a little campy. Like even when like the audience would laugh, the laugh track sounded kind of fake. I don't know. The whole thing felt just a little bit loose stylistically, and then it kind of breaks its own concept with editing into like scenes that are sort of behind the scenes, but they're shot in black and white, and it's like I wasn't quite clear on whether I was supposed to be watching like a documentary about the thing that happened or the raw footage or what. You know, it's not like it lost me or anything. I just felt like it was a little messy. But when it gets where it's going, I think that, you know, if anyone's looking for that what happens sort of feeling with this movie, I think it delivers in terms of like there's a horrific ending. So I almost feel like if this had been a half hour long, like an episode of an anthology show or something, it would have just kicked ass. But as a movie, it felt a little bit a little bit stretched out. I don't know, Ronald.
Is it short? Is it like an hour and a half or?
It's like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But I mean, it you know what's coming. I don't know. Like I think it does a good enough job of kind of staying interesting in those opening stretches.
Yeah.
But it did sort of feel like, well, we know what's going to happen, and we know eventually when we're going to get there. I don't know. It's like I think I just thought I was going to be under its spell just a little bit more, and I think the bumpy ride of the opening part for me had a lot to do with that actors coming on who were being so hammy that I didn't quite believe them as like as like real talk show guests, because it's not like talk shows just sucked back then, but that's kind of what you would think if watching this. It's like this feels like a very bad talk show before things get scary, and that just was like sort of not that fun for me to watch. Do you know what I'm talking about, Ronald? Like I felt like it was a slow burn in a way that I almost found it kind of cringy in a way that I think maybe was deliberate, but
Yeah.
I didn't find it that enjoyable.
So I've been to like 5 late night show tapings, and that felt the most authentic to me, the in between stuff, because they shoot in real time, which this thing was done in, and then the in between. So because they're trying to like map out the timing of the commercial breaks, they shoot it in real time, and then the breaks in between are the breaks in between. So it could be. It depends on what there's
What's happening.
typically they do a couple of tapings in one day. So you come if you have the later taping, I imagine that it'd be a little like looser. But if you're at the first taping, it's really tight. It's like real time an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But in between, you're talking. The commercial breaks are typically where the black and white scenes would have been. So it almost feels like that part feels so real time. It's a little crazy. It's like,
well, right. No, I'm not saying that I didn't
Yeah.
understand the real timeness. I'm saying that the way this movie starts, it's like you're watching a documentary that's presenting this footage.
yeah.
And then when you go into the footage and then it cuts to the black and white is that can't be behind the scenes footage, but it's shot
Yeah.
like it's documentary footage. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I just felt
Yeah,
like that was I was not sure what I was supposed to think of how that footage was being captured or brought into the thing. Or
I will sum that up by a lack of commitment to whatever it's trying to do. It really is. It has really incredible ideas. Like when you find out what the kind of narrative that John's referring to, when you find out what it is, it's so fucking cool. But it's like half documentary, half real time late night taping, and then like the behind the scenes thing combined. So what John's talking about is like a lack of commitment to whatever it is supposed to be. So like if it committed to being a real time thing, and the thing was the same, it was like the same color. I'll give you an example. This is such a nerdy thing. WWE is starting to do this thing now where like they're doing one shots like in the middle of a show. So like they may be talking to somebody, they'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna fight The Rock, I'm gonna kick his ass. And then from there, they're walking out in real time out to the crowd. Like, so it's like you pivot and then the camera follows you all the way out.
Right.
If it did that, if it committed to just it being a real time thing, like a real time taping, it would have been incredible. It would have been out of this world, though. It would have been like, it's already at 97%. It might have been 100%. It may have been like, but these little things that they're doing, it's inconsistent. You're like, is this a documentary? Because it's presenting what John's talking about is like at the beginning, they literally are, you're in a documentary. Right. Then it stops. Then you're in
they're like, now we present to you the tape from that night, and then within that it cuts away to these black and white scenes that are sort of, and again, I find that if you're watching a movie, you should accept the
for sure.
Reality of the movie is whatever you're watching, and it's like sometimes, especially if you're reading a book will pretend to be somebody's journal or pretend to be something that was found somewhere,
right?
But then somewhere in there you're just reading a book, and I'm not being that much of a stickler. I think what you're talking about as a lack of commitment, though, Ronald, is a little bit where the softness around the edges, even in the kind of talk show banter, is because they've just written it to be like, oh, talk shows are lame.
Like, for sure.
Talk show banter sucks. And it's like that's a lot of sucky banter to watch. And I honestly, nothing against David Dastmalchian, if I'm saying his name correct, or Dastmalchian. The other thing that's fun to watch about this movie is just watching him take center stage in a movie like this. He
Yeah.
can definitely handle it. I do think the script kind of lets him down a little bit in terms of like the jokes within the show that his character's supposed to be making. I don't know. I just think that stuff could have been slightly less bad. And I think the same thing you're talking about, Ronald, would have come across like even
For
more.
sure.
But I think as a kind of midnight movie that escalates and gets to a place, this does have that. I mean, how many horror movies have you watched where the last 5 or 10 minutes is really what people talk about? I think this movie at least delivers in that respect. Even if it maybe adds a layer too many at the end, I think it at least has somewhere to go. And like you said, Ronald, the actual story of what's happening and why it's happening is something. It's something to see. Like I didn't.
Sure.
It actually kind of it's creepy enough and it's interesting enough that that's not the problem. It's not like it's not an under-imagined thing.
Right.
I think honestly the lack of commitment, Ronald, can be summed up. I know we don't want to get into the scandal around AI imagery, but this movie caught a lot of hell online because some of the imagery in the film was generated using AI.
I didn't know that.
It's like the more to come, the little images that come up that are like more to come whenever they would go off the air and you would see like a skeleton. Like that stuff was generated with AI. And
I thought that was cool.
well, I thought that art, like, if you look closely at it, knowing it's AI, of course, I looked closely at them, and I was like, yeah, this stuff doesn't look that good. Like, the skeleton has weird fingers going in weird directions. It's like, it's just, what again? I don't even want to step in the whole debate about AI. I'm pretty opposed to it. But I didn't want to boycott this movie because of it, because
I didn't know that was a thing.
People were saying we're not going to go see this movie because of it. But my whole point is just, I think the fact that the AI images don't look that great is an indication of what you're talking about, Ronald. The sort of like cool ideas without a total commitment. Because I think that even if they were going to use AI images, they could have gotten ones that didn't look hinky, like that. I don't know. But I mean, I think that's a whole question of like, what corners you're trying to cut on a production, an indie production. You can sort of forgive them for it more than you can like a bigger production using AI, or what's probably about to happen is a lot more stuff that's being created, using it. So it wasn't that it bumped me that it was AI. That's a whole nother discussion. What bumped me was it's AI, and it also looked kind of like they were like, yeah, this is good enough. We'll stick this in. It didn't really look like something from the 70s. I do think they did a good job in general of creating that kind of 70s look. There are some moments where like the lighting in the studio and the way it's shot really looked authentic. And there were other times where it looked sort of filtered and, modern in a way that, again, I don't know if I should judge the movie based on how much it looks like it was made in the 70s. But I do think that's a factor. I would have enjoyed something that almost looked more like video that was distorted and crackly and old than something like this. I should also mention we know people in town who've worked on a film called WNUF Halloween Special, which is from 2013 and directed and co-written by friend of the show. He was on a long time ago, Chris LaMartina. Which is a very similar concept to this film. I was gratified to see that people online were mentioning WNUF Halloween Special in the same breath as this. But that is talk about commitment. The WNUF Halloween Special, like the commitment is the heart of the thing, because they made the whole movie feel like a videotape that was taped off the air. So they made fake commercials and everything about it is made to feel like something that was just recorded off of a local cable channel or a local affiliate. And even to the point where I think they were leaving the tapes around places so that people would find the tape and not know where it came from and stuff. So I think it's worth mentioning that as cool, and maybe this to some people feels like, oh, this is the upscaled version of an idea. But there were so many things about this that reminded me of the WNUF Halloween Special that I thought, oh, I bet Chris LaMartina is glad to see this out there because he's getting mentioned. But I bet it's also sort of an annoying thing to see something that is kind of walking in the footsteps of something he did 11 years ago. So
right,
I would say check them both out. I think this is a fun enough movie to see. I just didn't have the ride with it that I was expecting to have. I think I went out to the theater to see a few films recently, and they were all sort of mid and in some strange way, and this one is one of those for me.
Okay. Cool.
Great ending, though. I mean, honestly,
yeah, it was nuts,
and fun to watch David Dastmalchian. I will reiterate that it's fun to watch him carry a movie. He can totally do it. He's that character. He's one of those that guy actors. who definitely can hold the spotlight.
Go. What else have you guys seen?
I was gonna mention I went and saw Godzilla X Kong: New Empire.
Is that what we're
Ah,
calling it? Godzilla X Kong?
I
Godzilla
guess
times
it's
Kong?
X Kong times Kong X. I don't know what it is.
Well, there's your Dan Stevens sighting.
Godzilla multiplied by Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Dan Stevens was the one I was gonna mention from Cuckoo, but I love these movies, man. Like I had no shame. I have no shame in it at all. Like I can love
I love it.
Godzilla -1 for that kind of a movie that it is.
Yeah.
But what Warner Brothers is doing with this, MonsterVerse, and even with Apple TV having their element of it with Monarch. Um, I love these movies. Like they're so fun to me, and they're just like pure popcorn silliness. Like it's just entertaining and fun to watch monsters fight each other, and sometimes humans roll up on the screen and do something. That's probably they all get that's the biggest criticism that all of these movies kind of suffer from, even if even starting with Godzilla, excuse me, where there's lots of humans, and but there's like nothing interesting about them, or very few things that are interesting about them. To this one where there are genuinely minutes of scenes where there are no humans involved at all. Like there is genuine character scenes with Kong, mainly Kong.
Yeah.
Um,
I saw
which
it too, so I can
yeah, which is cool. And it's like that, and that's just them like buying into the idea that we are cool with just watching that too.
and that we like Kong.
Yeah, I love it.
In
Love it.
particular, we're pretty big fans of Godzilla too, but like we love Kong. Kong in this version of Kong, we've seen him take some punches to the
Some
face,
licks, yeah, man.
and he keeps coming back. I don't know. I feel like there's something. I think you're right, Steve. That like this movie delivers on that promise of like, do you get a monster fight every 15 or 20 minutes or something? Maybe even 10 or 15 minutes. You do, and I think that's
Yeah.
like the human stuff is very hit or miss, but yeah, like hanging out with Kong and like the little expressions on his face and stuff, like you really sort of get to know. Like he even has a couple of funny moments in
Yeah.
this that are sort of like character moments of humor that you don't expect to see. And I think doesn't that almost feel like that's the hook? That's like the fun of
Yeah,
these.
yeah, for sure.
And it's back to what you were saying, like people when Godzilla -1 turned out to be so great, everyone was talking about this series like it was dog shit. And it's like, what? Why do you have to pretend that you can't like both? Because they are so different.
Yeah. Those two things can exist at the same time. I don't really understand
Absolutely.
that
Right.
at all.
And I
It's
think that
wild.
also, like, people, this movie's done extremely well. It, overperformed, and I don't know how much, the success of Godzilla -1 was a part of that, but I mean, there's definitely a taste in the air. There's excitement, about that character. But yeah, this film and even the last one, definitely there's a lot of love shown towards Kong, and I think even
Mm,
just Kong Skull Island, there was a lot of love around that film. Maybe arguably the best of this franchise. But I just think that there's so much fun to be had watching these movies.
Mhm.
And they get creative and different things to do, different fights to have, places for fights, cool places for Godzilla to take naps. Um, you know,
That's one of my favorite gags
I
in the
know
movie.
it's so fucking good. It's so fun. And honestly, like Adam Wingard, like I think he's a great guy to do these movies. Like however long he sticks with the Godzilla and Kong films, he's obviously watching him and doing interviews for it. Like he's having a blast, and they're super entertaining. I think they look good.
They look pretty
They
darn good. I mean,
they
knowing
really do.
that it's all CGI, but I mean, I was looking for bad CGI in this movie, and I would say there's not bad CGI in this movie. It's just a
There's
lot of
not.
it. If you don't like CGI, you'll say, "Oh, this movie's nothing but CGI." But if you look for like I mean, there were maybe a few moments where like the hair movement on the back of Kong's back was like almost like I think he was supposed to be
Yeah,
standing in the wind, but in the
yeah.
long shot, it just looked like his hair was moving for no reason. Like stuff like that can be a little too much. But if you really look at what they're trying to do, which is like trying to give things some kind of sense of atmosphere, like I love little details. Like Steve, there's a point late in the film where Godzilla charges at Kong and they're rolling around out in the desert. And at some
Oh
point,
yeah.
Godzilla like is like leaning into Kong, and I think Kong hits Godzilla on the back. and you
Yeah.
see like the clouds of dust that rise up off of him
Off of him. Yeah.
from being hit on the back. And because of his size, it's like it's almost like a little atmospheric cloud is
Like a
formed around him
plume
for a
around
sec,
him.
and
Yeah.
it dissipates quickly. But those kind of details are the kind of thing. Every one of these monster fights has some little detail like that thrown into them, where you're seeing like just a little, a bit of something that doesn't feel fully automated, and there is a human element even when you're watching pixels fighting pixels in these movies. And I think that yeah, maybe it's Adam Wingard, maybe it's just the crew of these movies, but they do
Yeah.
look good. And especially if you know what you're in for. It's a brightly colored popcorn, roller coaster. And some of the human stuff is like a little underwritten, but at least they've got
it's
good actors there to try to
yeah.
really
I
sell
was
it.
I was gonna say yeah. It's like it leaves a lot to be desired, but you have Dan Stevens, you have Brian Tyree Henry, you have Rebecca Hall. Like they're at least it's about as good as it's gonna get, and
Yeah.
they're fun to watch. Especially Dan Stevens was I think a blast in this.
His first scene where he comes in and what he's there to do, I
Yeah.
thought was so fun. I mean, I didn't know any of that stuff, so I thought that was a fun
Yeah.
reveal that he's like what his job is. And even the scene, he's kind of like Ace Ventura meets Star-Lord,
Yeah.
and with an Australian accent, I think. I'm not quite sure what he was supposed to be.
Is he? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I thought Australian. I don't remember what I thought.
But he was a
But yeah,
blast of energy and like fun. And it's like once again, just back to that thing of Dan Stevens when he pops up, he's doing something a little different than the last time you saw him, almost always.
yeah, it's a lot of fun, man. Like, and um, I definitely would recommend if you like these movies and you're hanging out waiting, it's definitely really fun to watch. Especially, and I also saw it the day it opened, so like the crowd was like super into it. It was a sold out screening, and I went at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, and like people were cheering during the movie, and like at the end of the movie, the entire theater was like clapping. Like
Wow.
that's those cool moments that you like seek out in a theater, even beyond the projection and the sound and that piece of the experience. I had a lot of fun with the movie. Obviously, the crowd that I watched it with did, and that's just like a really good feeling. That
Yeah.
communal energy of like, yeah, we all got here at the same time and watched one thing together without really playing on our phones, and like people are clapping. It's like it was really cool. It was fun.
That's really cool.
But yeah, that's really the only like big thing that I've watched this week. I just wanted to make a point to get out and see that when it came out because again, I really enjoy this monster verse that they've created. And yeah, I'll see them if they keep putting them out.
Yeah, I kind of hope that we get another one because it feels like they know it feels like they're having fun with this world. And
Yeah,
again,
for
if
sure.
if the idea of a hollow world where there's like a sky that's an upside down world and there's monsters everywhere, if you don't want to see that, then stay away from these
Yeah,
movies and don't complain
yeah,
about them. But if you do
right.
want to see that, I don't think you're going to see anything else that's quite this crazy. That's like at this franchise level. Do you know what I mean? Like this is some deep, weird fantasy ideas. Like
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
this is sillier in some ways than almost any other franchise, but it also like they visualize it so well. And I love seeing like all the creatures that are in the hollow world. Like I just love how it's like sort of monsters, sort of prehistoric, sort of there's some evil demonic sort of creatures it seems like, but there's also
right,
just a lot of
right.
animals there. So I don't know. And yeah, Kong gets a robotic hand in this. And
What did they call that project? What?
Powerhouse. I think it was what it was called,
Powerhouse.
Project Powerhouse. But also, I
Little
just as a spoiler, I saw someone tweet about this, and I guess I'll confirm this for people that at no point do Kong and Godzilla high five or shake hands in this movie. So if you're waiting for that, you're gonna miss it.
That's
I forget
hilarious.
who tweeted that. Well, I saw one other big movie that I was curious about that I was, kind of wanting to see, and I don't know if you guys haven't seen it. There's not much of a conversation to have about it, but I saw Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire.
I haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen it
You know, I mean, I honestly felt I missed my family. Like I had to go see it by myself because I had a chance, and I was like, I wanted to see some stuff for this episode, and I was like, we had tried to see a movie over spring break a couple of times, and Henry had other plans with like actual children that he wanted to hang out with. So, I should say teenagers, but they're technically children. So I went to see it, and I was thinking like, yeah, this would have been really fun to see with like my 10-year-old son and my wife and popcorn and like go get lunch afterwards. it felt very strange watching this movie as a 50-year-old man sitting in a theater by myself. But even beyond that, because I can get into I could watch, any kind of movie and get into it. It just feels
Yeah.
like the best parts of this movie are also the problem, which is that the opening stretch, which is like you're just kind of hanging out with the characters and you're seeing different combinations of people. And honestly, like Dan Aykroyd is here and he's awake and he's like playing this character. If there's a reason, I mean, if you want to see Dan Aykroyd kind of have fun doing what he loves to do, which is spout jargon and like act, he's doing that in this. Paul Rudd has some fun stuff with McKenna Grace. There's a little bit of a reluctant father role that he's kind of starting to assume. That's kind of a fun thread. Early in the film, these scenes just kind of pile up, and it took me a minute to realize like I was an hour in, and we haven't like the premise that's set up in the trailer of New York is freezing. That like gets going at like an hour and a half into this movie.
Oh my God.
The idea of who the villain is, the name of the villain, them knowing what they're up against is way late in this thing. So as charming as the kind of hangout movie portion of this movie was, when I realized I had spent the first hour sort of hanging out and cutting to this and cutting to that, it really made me go, man, this movie is kind of messy in that way, or just like maybe it's on the screenplay level. There's not enough story. And then when it does get the story going, it reminds me of like an episode of the real Ghostbusters cartoon, which I think a lot of people are going to love because that was the
Right.
Ghostbusters they grew up with. And even that, I'm okay with that. I'm fine with this being a little bit, like whatever people say about the first one being like a horror movie. People talk some shit about the first Ghostbusters movie. Like it was this thing. It didn't do everything people say it did. It's got a lot of things going for it though that make it special. And this movie Frozen Empire is like another attempt to sequelize Ghostbusters without quite hitting it. They've had several different versions of it. But the problem for me is just that jumping around with the characters and how much it affects the kind of momentum of the movie, so that later when things get going, there's not really a lot of cool story to deal with once they know what the threat is. And I'll just say this as a problem. At the end of this film, guys, there are 12 Ghostbusters.
Oh my God.
There are 12
What?
characters standing around, most of them wearing costumes and proton packs. And they literally are just kind of standing around, kind of talking to each other. It's not like a thing where everybody has a role, or everybody has a reason to be there. So it's like they didn't know whether they wanted to bring back the old crew or focus on the new crew or have new characters. And the only person who really makes a dent in all that noise is Kumail Nanjiani, who's at the very least knows what kind of movie he's in. He knows he's in a comedy and he's playing a kind of comic character. You could see he's kind of patterning himself maybe after like a Rick Moranis almost kind of comedy level performance. So he's having fun. He's good. There are funny moments, but most of the good stuff is in the first half before the story gets going. And then you might question why a Ghostbusters movie is taking an hour to get its story going, But again, like I said, if I was sitting there with a kid who wanted to go home and make a Ghostbusters proton pack and put it on his back, I might be having a totally different feeling about this. But it really did feel like the end was like the messiest part. The momentum, the pacing, the lines, and everything just felt like they didn't like. I felt like there were reshoots, or definitely rewrites or something. There was something going on with this movie that felt very structurally weird. But
wow.
I've seen enough people that had a good time with it that I really do think it might be a question of which Ghostbusters did you grow up with. If the cartoon was your jam, and that's it, then this might be more the flavor of Ghostbusters that you want, But
wow.
But they should just not let Bill Murray anywhere near these movies. Like
That
half the time
sucks.
he seems like he doesn't want to be there, and the other half of the time it seems like he's trying to recreate Peter Venkman energy at like 70, and it's just not.
It's not
I don't know. Like it's not what I want to see.
His interviews have been weird around it too. Like he's when he's on the panel, he just seems kind of like, oh yeah. The movie's really good. I'm like, what's going on? He didn't seem very alert. That's rough.
Just get that money.
I get that money. Oh, maybe I should talk about the things I've seen. Okay, so
go ahead.
Things you've seen, and then go into our new feature. Let's get physical. With Ronald James.
So
and
two things that I watched. Yeah, with consent.
With your consent.
Yes. Roku has a series that I'm a big fan of that started a couple of days ago called WWE Next Gen. So WWE's kind of streamlined their recruitment sort of process. Before, it just used to be like Oh, you're very pretty. What, do you want to wrestle? Oh, you're very tall. Do you want to wrestle? But now they have this NIL sort of program, which basically is similar to like how they recruit like college athletes. Like it's like they want people
Right.
to be athletic. They want people to be well spoken. They want people to have experience with like public relations and things like that. So now they've kind of Triple H and Shawn Michaels have kind of streamlined the program to this really cool sort of system that works. It's tried and true. Basically, they've created maybe 20 big stars in the past like 7, 8 years out of this program. Some of them being like Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair. The Miz kind of comes from the beginnings of it, like sort of like it had a different name and stuff before, but the beginnings of that program. So it's really cool to see this journey and old man Shawn Michaels kind of completely annihilating people that are coming in talking like they're from the 90s wrestling era. Because people kind of try to come in and sound like, yeah, brother, you know what it comes down to it. And he's like, cut that shit out. Like, this is not 1990. Create your own sort of identity. So that's really cool to watch. Reality TV show. I think it's like 7 episodes or so. Fun. Please watch it. The second thing that I saw that made me really emotional randomly, Lynch Oz. Lynch Oz is a documentary that was I don't know how these movies go straight to Criterion. I don't know how that works. It's like some movies it takes 20 years, some movies it's the next year that the year after it comes out. But this is an incredible documentary that follows this sort of comprehensive look at David Lynch's obsession with The Wizard of Oz. He's stated it a couple times. Well, a lot of times. He says it a ton of times. Some of the like clicking heels in movies and things like that, direct references, and then ideologies in some of the movies that kind of follow it. And then, they interview John Waters and a couple other directors that kind of give their sort of thing. Essentially, like, there's this theory, and I've heard this a ton of times, that A, most things are romantic comedies. That's one. But then B, every movie is a Wizard of Oz tale. Good ones, especially, but really, really good ones kind of tackle some of the tropes of.
Yeah, you go to a world, right? Like it's a new
Yeah,
world.
yeah. It's a new world. Everybody's looking for something they already have. It's like this cool sort of thing. But David Lynch is especially embracing of this idea. And it's like clip by clip, they go by like things that he references, almost direct quotes from the movies, from the movie. It's incredible. It's a really cool documentary. And what you realize is like, I think I kind of looked at David Lynch as kind of this like super serious guy. Every time I see him talk, he's very like, kind of serious.
Well, he's very
But
dry. He's deadpan. Yeah.
yeah, deadpan for sure. And what this kind of reveals is like he's kind of a big kid. And when you look
Right.
at like the way that he approaches filmmaking and how he really wants to tell stories about good people, even if terrible people are in the middle of it, you kind of see these sort of tropes in some of his movies, but like he is a real believer in the sort of good people win. And then if
at
they
the very
don't
least,
win,
depicting good, like he'll depict the
yeah,
nastiest
depicting
things,
good. Yeah,
but he'll
yeah.
also depict like almost in a naive way. He'll depict
Yeah,
good
for
the
sure,
same
for
way.
sure.
Right.
Yeah, he has a couple like things that he outright says that he does in every movie. He says it. He kind of they have these interviews interspersed, and he's kind of like, this is what I love. This is what I don't like. This is what I'm obsessed with. This is why I chose this. It's really cool. It's a good documentary. Now I'm gonna get into my physical media because it's weird. I just bought this, and then I got reminded of this movie through this
Let's get
documentary.
physical.
Yeah, this is what
Come on and get physical.
I'm very excited about watching this. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time, the yearly. Another thing that
Let
the
me see your
documentary
media.
The one thing that they talk about in the documentary is Wizard of Oz wasn't a popular movie at first. Yeah,
right.
and that like
wild?
yeah, the kind of they pushed it on us. They kind of were like, "Hey, this is like a thing," and then it became really popular. And then kids and adults sent in letters and were like, "Hey, what's the big deal? You need to show this again." And then they made it like a yearly thing, which is
It's a
really
Wonderful
cool.
Life is another one that was like not a big success.
Oh my God, they talk about that too.
And became overplayed because it was so cheap to license it or whatever, because it wasn't a big deal. And then it became like a staple of
it's huge.
Like, cable. Yeah, that's great. It's great that they bring that up. I love
it's
that.
Really cool. They draw the parallels and even story-wise draw parallels between them. It's a cool sort of thing. The next one I have is When Evil Lurks. What an incredible horror film. I haven't watched it this version, but the sound mix is supposed to be a little better. So I'm excited about hearing the terror a little more well mixed. Now we're gonna cross the pond. We're gonna go to Europe.
No, you can't just spring that on us.
yeah, I can't just send you on a trip.
Just say we're going. I don't even have my passport.
Pack your bags, goddamn it. We're going to London.
Gotta get a passport.
Second Sight's the Babadook. They just released this a couple years ago, and this movie kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I think the reason for it was unique. It had a cool story. And it feels like I've always heard this saying that if you could pitch the story in a sentence, then it's one of those things that'll stick with you. People are like, oh shit, like I think that's really cool. And since my next one is
Ronald, just by the way, before you move on from Babadook, I just have to share this story on the podcast. It's one of my favorite things that's ever happened. Henry watched the Babadook. And Nikki was like telling me about. I came back from being out for a while, and Henry had watched the Babadook, and she said, "Henry picked something called the Boo Boo Dash or whatever."
The Boo Boo Dash. I like that.
The Boo Boo Dash. Yeah, it's almost like that should be our when people do like the sort of sound-alike movie that comes out around a movie, like
I want to see the Boo Boo Dash
at the checkout line. It's like, it's only $5. I bought a copy of the Boo Boo Dash. Isn't that supposed to be good?
The Boo Boo Dash. Oh man. So then there's I'm really kind of getting into like smaller labels that put out stuff. Indicator is a British label, and this movie, the Batwoman, is one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen in my life. It's like clearly exploitation. This woman is almost always in a bikini, but she's Batwoman, and a man wants to combine the strength of a brilliant superhero, combine it with an animal, and make a supervillain that will destroy the world. But he needs Batwoman's DNA in order to do it. So it's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
It is such a fun fucking movie. I think it came out in the 60s. 8,000 copies of this came out, and I have the 3,474th. And it is such a fun movie, man. Batwoman. And then the last one, this is kind of when I like with small labels grab something and restore it. This is an Australian label, Umbrella. It took almost 2 months for this to come. And that is Super Mario Brothers.
Nice.
Yeah. So 4K restoration. I cannot wait to watch this. I just got it. It took, quite a while. 5.1 DTS mix. And I'm probably going to listen to that. I'm probably going to watch it this weekend. And then one more, Brigsby Bear. Brigsby Bear, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking about how when that movie, you guys tipped me off to it. And it was on my top movies of that year list. I don't even know if it made it on your list, but it made it on mine. And then I right after that had a push to watch it with my family, and it just never happened. But it's like I recently realized, like, oh, that's one that I think everyone in my house would love if we sat down and watched it. So I need
fun movie, man.
Is that like a new transfer or I guess it was a new enough movie. There's no need for
it's a new enough. I'm not sure when this came out, but yeah, it's a Sony Pictures release, which I did not know. I want him to make more movies. I want Kyle Mooney to make more movies.
Well, doesn't he
I
have
think Kyle
something
Mooney's...
coming up that he's?
Yeah, he's got that
Mm,
Y2K one I was
Yeah.
telling you guys about.
no, what?
No, I love him. I miss him on SNL. I love
Me
his
too,
his little
man.
dash of weirdness.
Yeah,
Even in a
yeah,
sketch where he was just playing like the neighbor, he would always throw in. There was always something going on with Kyle that was almost like an in joke with you if you like him, if that makes
yeah,
any sense. And then Beck Bennett, he and Beck Bennett were very very funny together on that show. So.
yeah. There was another guy that was on SNL that I really liked. His name was Paul Britton.
Mm-hmm.
He was only on there for like a season or two, and he had this like these sexual harassment seminars. You're like, hi, how you doing? I want to talk to you guys about. Oh, it was like sex therapy too. It was like sex therapy, but also how to do it respectfully. He was really sleazy. Oh God, this so good. His name was Ed. Hi, I'm Ed. He didn't even have like a last name. It was so good. Oh,
He's
Paul
one of those guys
Britton.
that still pops up from time to time on like podcasts, doing like
Mm,
Comedy Bang Bang or whatever. I think
I like
you'll
him,
hear him
man.
occasionally.
I like him
Um,
a lot.
no, there's people who are only on SNL for a minute. It's always kind of funny, because then other people are there for 12 years.
Non-stop.
Well, even the people that are sort of new in your mind, like I was hearing recently, that guy Mikey Day,
Hmm.
he's been on the show for a long time now, and it's like I was
Yeah,
like in my mind, he's still one of the sort of newish people who's pretty good. So,
it's wild,
um,
man.
yeah. All right. Well, I think that's an epi.
That is what they call that. Yeah, I think that's good, guys. Again, next week we'll have episode 410. John's pick required viewing was 12 Monkeys,
12 Monkeys, yes.
and we're gonna do a Baltimore centric episode. Uh, and again, we're gonna just do a quick scene mention for The Wire,
Yes.
so that we can shine a light on some other things, and maybe I'm gonna try to pick something like that. Maybe some people don't even realize has a Baltimore connection. 12 Monkeys is a good
Mm.
one. I don't think a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
people
a
think of
really
it as
good one.
Baltimore. So I'll try to stay with that trend. But yeah, that'll be next week. Moviesmovie.com is the website if you want to listen to past week's episodes. In actuality, all of our episodes are there. Moviesmovie.com also links to all the podcast platforms that you may want to listen to this podcast in, whichever one you prefer. If you do that already, please leave a review or a comment or a rating, whatever it may offer you. Depending on where you go, I think there's different options there, but we would appreciate that, obviously. And youtube.com/moviesmoviepod if you want to do the video visual element. And if you do that, please subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when the new episodes come out. But we will see you next week, and hopefully we watch some really great Baltimore stuff to talk about next week. But until then, as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.